Do whatever you gotta do. Just leave the air fryer. What's good, y'all? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. So, it's basically the end of April now, and we've had little to no real updates in regards to Pokemon. Switch 2 pre-orders coming up soon, but unfortunately, I live in the US, so we'll see what plays out in regards to that. But it appears now more than ever we have officially reached another drought era, which means it's time to talk more about the possibilities and future when it comes to modern Pokemon. I'm sure we'll have plenty more Legends ZA talks in the future, but as of right now, that topic feels a little exhausted because there is literally nothing else that we haven't talked about already. But since it's time to look a little bit elsewhere, I figured, hey, why don't I talk about something that's been on my mind for years now? Any of you guys that have been following me for a decent amount of time know for a fact that I love video games. A lot of video games. Borderline addiction type situation, but that's not a conversation for here. My point is, because I play so many games, there's a lot of times where I can't really help but make comparison amongst those games and Pokemon and whatever else. Throughout the years, you guys have constantly heard me compare Pokemon to other games. However, in this particular instance, I wanted to do something a little different. As made clear by the title and thumbnail, there's a lot of mechanics that I would love to see utilized in some way, shape, or form for Pokemon. Essentially, there's a lot of concepts and mechanics from other games that I would love to steal and see how they would work for modern Pokemon. So I think the premise now is pretty obvious. So with all that being said, why don't you go ahead, get cozy, grab yourself a nice cold drink, and may I suggest a meal for you. Maybe some nice hot crab legs for you to bust open and dip into your orange juice while we talk about a couple of mechanics from other games that I would love to see work somehow for modern Pokemon. Before we get started here, two things I want to make clear. One, I would not want all of the mechanics that I mention in this video at the same time in one game. That would be way too overwhelming. More so for the developers than anything because they can barely focus on getting the games to work, let alone implementing all of these super unique mechanics. Secondly, for this video in particular, I only grabbed a select few games. I didn't want to go too overboard because we would be here all day. So for now, we're just gonna start with the select few. However, if you guys are interested in doing like a part 2 of this, or if you guys want to do a response video on this so that you guys can pick out certain mechanics from other games that you would love to see in Pokemon, let me know. I'm super down to do that. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into things. The first game that I'm going to start with here is actually Cyberpunk 2077. I've mentioned this game a couple of times now because I have seen the potential of a game that started off in a complete rut truly turn itself around with genuine care and love. Easily one of my favorite games in recent years, and I've played through quite a couple of times now. The first mechanic that I would love to steal from Cyberpunk 2077 that I think was even kind of underutilized in its own game was the where you started choice. When it comes to the conversation of Pokemon, we have had so many conversations over the years about the limitations on customization that I've lost track at this point. But I feel like being able to choose where you originate from could really help differ everybody's experiences with these games. At the very beginning of Cyberpunk 2077, when you first turn the game on, before you even customize and configure V, you have to decide where your version of V originates from. Like, yeah, for the most part, their general story still plays out the same. However, your choice at the beginning can change what kind of dialogue options you have throughout your playthrough. For example, your version of V might be a little more in tune with the corporate world, and because of that, your version of V may be able to speak up to or even outwit in certain scenarios certain corporate suits during certain scenarios. And it's stuff like that that's really cool because you never know when that decision can really come in handy. And it's really interesting because, yeah, you picked Corpo for this playthrough, but now you're curious. What if I didn't have Corpo? What if I didn't have this response ready to go? What would I have done then? And then you're incentivized for another playthrough with a completely different backstory. I would absolutely adore something like this for Pokemon. What region my character originates from, maybe their upbringing as well. Hell, I feel like that would be even more interesting than picking a partner Pokemon to start the game with. Maybe your origins determines what kind of partner Pokemon you start the game with. And obviously, of course, the most important aspect of this is actually having a game in which your responses actually matter, so that would probably be like the most important takeaway of all this, but that plays into so many things it's not even funny. But point is, I would love to see a mechanic in which we can choose our origins. I feel like that would be a lot of fun. The second and last mechanic that I'll pick from Cyberpunk for now is the time-based missions. And in this particular instance, I'm not talking about missions that are on a timer. I'm talking about missions that can only be started or collected at a certain time. There are specific times in which you need to wait for a character to show up at a specific time, whether it be 7 or 8 o'clock, or even possibly midnight before you can start the mission. And that mission is heavily based around that time. If it's happening at night, it's most likely some form of sneaking mission. Minor spoiler alert here, but one of my personal favorite missions in Cyberpunk 2077 is the mission in which you and Takakura make plans to raid a tower during a parade. The parade happens at night, so obviously you have to wait until night falls. And then once you do, you're like a freaking ninja going up and down this building, clearing out all these different enemies, and it's too dark for them to see sometimes. It's so awesome, and I absolutely adore this mission and would love something like this for Pokemon. We already desperately need actual side quests in mainline generational games, but I feel like it would add even more to it if we had quests that like had certain conditions to start, and I feel like we would be a lot more involved if we actually had to wait those times out. It would be so interesting to see what kind of missions and side quests and just general like stories they could come up with by doing that. I would personally love it if there were only certain battles that you could have with like rivals or other important figures within Pokemon if you were to meet them at specific places at specific times. I think that would just be super awesome, especially because there is a day and night cycle in Pokemon already, so why not implement more stuff like that? And I do mean like a specific in-game genuine clock that you can see so you can watch the time and be like, oh, it's 6 p.m. This character should be waiting here. I know that those two mechanics that I grabbed were like very specific and like super simple, but I couldn't think of much else right now that I could implement into Pokemon without it becoming too much else, because this is Cyberpunk we're talking about, completely different genre. Now, this next one is very obvious and I have mentioned it a couple of times throughout the channel, but before we get started, I need everybody to know I'm not talking about the weird stuff, specifically the romance stuff. We don't need that in Pokemon at all. With that being said, Persona. I'm sure a couple of light bulbs went off the moment I said romance. Y'all already knew I was talking about Persona. Outside of the romance aspect, there are a lot of very neat and very specific mechanics from Persona that I would love to see implemented in other games, specifically for Pokemon. For example, I would love a situation for a Pokemon game to implement the calendar system. For anybody that hasn't played Persona before, let me explain it to you. Essentially, Persona does have kind of a life sim situation going on in which you are a student by day and a shadow fighter by night. During the day, you're going to school, building your stats, building bonds and relationships. And all of that directly impacts how strong you are and how many abilities you can utilize at night when you're fighting shadows. However, they made this work by implementing a system in which you actually do go by a calendar day by day. Certain story events that progress the story happen at a certain date, and you only have so much time to prep yourself up before that date comes up. For example, there could be a major story event that happens on June the 4th, which means you have all of May to prep up, build your bonds, get your items in order, get your stats in order, so that you can be properly prepared for whatever happens on June the 4th. Now, the only problem with a calendar system in a mainline Pokemon game is that we couldn't really do things traditionally. We couldn't just be a trainer and we have to go by a day-by-day system. A lot of people would be really unhappy with that, probably. Especially because there's no time limit on becoming a champion, so that wouldn't really work there. We would definitely have to change the profession. I feel like something of like a detective story would be really, really good with this, right? As a detective, you would spend a lot of your time getting insights and information on things that would happen during major dates. And so, once you get all of your information in order, you know when to stop the bad guys by, or when you need to participate in that next major mission. So, you have all of that time in between to train up your Pokemon, maybe build up your bonds with your teammates and crewmates and things like that, and then progress the story once the major event comes up. I really do feel like this would be a very fun mechanic to add, not only because it would be a nice change of pace for veteran players, but also for like younger players, it could introduce like really good time management skills, you know? I'm not gonna sit here and say that my time management skills are perfect by any means. They're not even good, but I will say they've definitely seen better days after Persona. And I really do feel like a younger audience that could get into something like that, that does implement something of a calendar system, could learn some pretty valuable life skills down the line. I don't know, I just think that would be really neat. Now, while I was describing that, I briefly touched upon another mechanic that I would really love to implement, and this one is critical and can work in pretty much any mainline game going forward, and that would be the bonding mechanic. And again, in this context, I am not talking about romance. In this situation, I'm specifically talking about building up friendships with very specific characters. The thing about Pokemon is that we have so many characters with so much wasted potential, it's not even funny. And I feel like a mechanic like this one could easily, completely fix that. For anybody that doesn't know, essentially in Persona, a lot of your time, especially during the day, you are spending it building friendships and relationships with people by consistently talking to them, getting to know them, getting to know their history. 9 times out of 10, you meet a character that may or may not be integral to the story, you get caught up with them in a situation that may relate to their past, and you kind of help them work through it. By doing this, you've done a couple of things. First, one of the biggest incentives to do any of this is to gain skills that can help you throughout your playthrough. Whether it's getting better bonuses by doing stuff during the day or having stronger abilities when you fight at night, you are racking up abilities by helping these people. And 2, the most important aspect is that you are actually learning about these characters, their histories, their personalities, and why they are the way that they are. Throughout Persona, there are so many interesting characters with so many interesting backstories and histories that you can't help but feel for them once you learn where they come from. And this mechanic in particular is something that I feel would vastly help Pokemon in that department. Could you imagine if Generation 8 had something even remotely similar to this? Do you realize how much that would change people's perspective on that game? Specifically mine? Could you imagine a situation in which we could actively get to know Marnie as a character, get to know her history, her relationship with her Pokemon and with her brother and things like that, why she is the way that she is? Marnie's character has some of the biggest wasted potential in the entirety of the Pokemon franchise. You will not be convincing me otherwise. But a bonding mechanic that would allow us to put her in a situation that has it so that she has to confront her past a little bit would definitely help us get to know her character a little bit more and even improve general perception on her. And in the case of Pokemon, this would be a great excuse to open up potential for some really cool future battles and things like that, you know? Awesome events that we wouldn't be able to get otherwise. One of the reasons why I enjoy Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's story so much is that we actively have characters that go through hefty waves of development throughout the story. But what I'm trying to get at here is that the main story isn't the only place that we can utilize to learn more about these characters. What I appreciate about Persona is that throughout the course of your playthrough, even in the main story, we are seeing these characters go through a lot of development and learning situations, but we also have the opportunity to learn more about them individually in their own separate storylines so that we can get to know these characters better. That is just such a good way to put a magnifying glass on characters so that they can have their own space to develop. And Pokemon simply does not do that often enough, so I would love for this to be some form of a mechanic in a way. I think that would just be super neat. And for now, I think the last thing that I'm gonna grab from Persona is probably the stat-based response system. Like I mentioned earlier, throughout your playthrough, you're gonna be spending a lot of your time during the day raising your stats. One of the primary things you're going to be focused on, though, is your social stats. During the day, you're doing little things here and there to raise your stats in knowledge, guts, proficiency, kindness, and charm. This plays directly into the bonding mechanic because if your social stats aren't at a certain percentage, you won't be able to progress certain storylines. You raise these stats so that your character better understands how to respond to somebody when they're going through something or when they need a certain direction of advice. Now, of course, Pokemon doesn't necessarily need something like this, but I just feel like it would definitely help if we had one to have the other to really help amplify the gameplay elements as well as the character developments of your own character as well as other characters. Again, they play hand in hand, so I feel like it would just be a big bonus to be able to have a situation in which you could utilize certain mechanics to raise these stats. I feel like also raising these stats could definitely help you get a better edge in battle as well. Like, it really can just work the same way. I don't know, but I don't want to turn it too much into Persona, you know? I just feel like it would be really fun to see these mechanics utilized in a Pokemon setting. Now, I do have a few more listed here, but in reality, they may sound a little redundant to talk about right now, so I think I'll save those for another time. So for now, I think I'm gonna cut it off here. Obviously, none of those mechanics are ever coming to Pokemon, but you guys know me, I like to imagine a lot, so I just thought it would be fun to kind of imagine what these mechanics could potentially look like in a Pokemon setting. I mean, it's not impossible to happen, sure, but the likelihood of Nintendo Pokemon going through all of the hassle and trouble to get through any form of copyright laws through like Atlas or whoever else to get rights to something like the calendar system, I don't know if they own that or whatever, but I just can't see a situation like that happening. So yeah, I imagine that Pokemon is going to continue to develop the games as they see fit and just do their own thing. And that's totally fine. With Pokemon Legends ZA as proof, they are coming up with new fun ways to make playing through a Pokemon game different and unique from the standard, and that's genuinely all I could ever ask for. So we still have a lot to look forward to and a lot of things that we could potentially see in terms of mechanics going forward from here on out. So we'll see what, plays out from here on out. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. Yeah, this one has been in the back of my mind for a little bit. So now that we're in drought era, you're gonna see a couple of bottom barrel pulls, man. It's gonna be fun for y'all, I'm sure. Maybe, I don't know, we'll see. But I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic over to you guys, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree that some of the mechanics that I listed from these other games could be really cool to see in Pokemon? You think that they could work out and even help benefit modern Pokemon in a couple of ways? Or do you think that I'm crazy, these mechanics won't work, but maybe you have some mechanics of your own from other video games that you would love to see implemented in Pokemon? Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I am always gonna be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!